In our previous lecture, we have talked about the general philosophy and ideas of visual analytics. In this topic, we're going to cover the information visualization and the visual perception. Any process of making sense of a data set always start with visualizing data so that human can perceive. First, I want to spend a few minutes of situating the topic of information visualization in the context of visual analytics, so that you know why we talk about information visualization. As we mentioned earlier, the challenge of visual analytics is to deal with the huge collection of data, our information overload problem. So the starting point is that we have a large data store, which normally we can consider them as a set of tables, although there's different kind of data sets, text, images, and others. We mainly consider that things has been described as entities and as attributes. One of the ways to achieve insight and learn from what's going on is to directly read through the tables and attributes. Okay, and that's not going to be very effective because human reading of data and text are very slow and have a very limited memory. Okay, so the speed of understanding and transferring the data or reading to human mind is very slow. Information visualization approach take an alternative path to achieving the insight from data. Instead of presenting the tabular data directly to human, we'll take steps to transform the alphanumerical data into some visual spatial representation. So we call this step as mapping from data to visual information. If our visual mapping from data to a visual representation is done properly, then we can present our visual information to human. The benefit of doing this visual mapping and visual transfer is that humans have much better capacity to visually perceive information and to think and to understand visual knowledge. So we're trying to utilize that capacity in visual analytic tasks. Visual perception allows humans to see the grand overview of our data as well as perceiving patterns and clusters and any outliers. So that perception gives you potentials for achieving insight, but they are not insight itself. It's to support human reasoning on those patterns and processes and be able to interpret what they perceive in the context of their existing knowledge. So the last mapping step from visual to data insight, the perceptual input from the visual presentation of the data has to be compared with what already known by the person and be able to tell whether the new patterns and the observation are consistent or against what the existing knowledge, and how that will be able to extend what we know. So within this general approach, this lecture will cover the two phases of this overall approach. The first phase is information visualization, dealing with the mapping from data to visual representation. The second phase of this process is visual perception and how people perceive visual information and to achieve extraction of features and patterns.